Oh my God, what a love fest we have here. Oh my God. Oh, sorry, cramp.
That's the teaser.
Baby. Oh my God. Girl, it is physically demanding work podcasting. I'm Charlie Sohn, a screenwriter and journalist.
I'm Agnes Reese, a pop singer and songwriter.
And this is Mysteries of the Euroverse.
On this episode, we're talking about Eurovision and authoritarianism.
First, against the backdrop of the current election, we explore two stories of how Eurovision songs have played a role in the journey to and the journey back from right-wing governance.
Next, we interview preeminent American Eurovision YouTuber Alicia Michelle about the current state of the contest.
Finally, we sit down with Broadway composer Joe Iconis to explore how Eurovision songs have played into the fortunes of different political factions in a game we're calling Bounce or Backlash, Fear and Loathing at Eurovision.
We take a look behind the scenes at all the scandal songs and queens. So come along as we traverse all the mysteries of the Euroverse. All the mysteries of the Euroverse.
All right, we are back for another episode of Mysteries of the Euroverse.
Not only are we back for an episode of Mysteries of the Euroverse, we are back with the award-winning Mysteries of the Euroverse. Because we have won 2 awards.
I know, so many awards. Where are we going to put them all?
I don't know. We need another bookshelf.
Or maybe just get rid of some books.
Yeah, but so we won a gold award at the Davey Awards in the news and current events category of podcasts.
Because we are nothing if not current.
Exactly.
And we won a silver award for Best Indie Podcast at the Signal Awards. Moving to the main topic of this episode, we are talking about Eurovision and authoritarianism. For no reason in particular.
No.
It's just kind of been on our minds for some reason. But yes, there is currently an election in America. And we thought we would theme our episode in relation to the potential fall of American democracy.
Yeah. Now, as we're recording this, we have no idea what the outcome of the election is. By the time you're listening, you might know the results. So you might have a better idea of how we're doing.
Yeah. But no, we were talking about, in terms of this election, how music has really played a pretty big part of it. There, of course, was that story of Trump swaying to a variety of songs on stage rather than delivering his speeches.
Yeah. Maybe he watched Eurovision and was very inspired because it was long.
It was long. There were no more than 6 people on stage.
There was choreography.
It was campy.
Yep.
But then obviously Kamala Harris launched her campaign to Beyonce's song Freedom, and that theme of freedom has really sort of played into her messaging.
We keep seeing Trump getting cease and desist letters from these artists being like, please don't play my music.
Right.
Please don't play my music. While Kamala is getting Beyonce's personal approval to use Freedom as her campaign song.
One thing that's kind of interesting is thinking about the contrast between these two campaigns and what their relationship to music is, right? So like Trump, the songs on his playlist, from the hits of Andrew Lloyd Webber to Ave Maria to even YMCA, I mean, they're time capsule songs. They do not speak to the contemporary moment compared to Freedom, which is literally the framework of Kamala Harris's campaign. Ave Maria doesn't communicate anything specific.
But would you say that Ave Maria is like the concept of a plan?
Exactly. No, and compared to that, Freedom is literally a policy document. So, these were kind of like the conversations that we were having. And then we started thinking about Eurovision and how Eurovision songs in the past have related to authoritarianism, right?
And so we're going to bring you 2 stories on this episode.
Yes.
One of them has to do with a country breaking free of dictatorship through Eurovision. How was that for a teaser?
Yeah. And the other one is about how Eurovision played into, unfortunately, a country's descent from a free democracy to semi-authoritarianism, or what people now like to call competitive authoritarianism. To start out with, though, we are moving to Portugal in 1973. So Antonio Salazar basically comes to power. First, his government in a coup in 1926, but then in 1932, he takes over as prime minister, establishing this dictatorship that he called the New State, or Estado Novo. Even though Estado Novo was in power until 1974, Salazar actually had a stroke in 1968. So when we're talking about Portugal in Eurovision in 1973, we're actually not directly talking about Salazar. We're talking about Marcelo Caetano. This was a period in 1973 of something called the Marcelo Spring, which is not an air freshener. It was a brief period of time where Caetano tried to introduce some liberalizing reforms in this very authoritarian state, right?
He was like, let's be nice dictators.
Yeah, dictatorship with a twist.
Yes.
Unfortunately, more hardline elements within the administration eventually quashed these reforms. But in 1973, things were a little bit more liberal than they normally were.
So it was in this more liberal dictatorial environment that...
My favorite kind of dictatorship.
Where Fernando Tordo's Trata was selected as Portugal's entry to Eurovision. And the song literally translates to bullfight.
This bullfight is really a metaphor for resistance to the Salazar regime. So you might be thinking like, wait, this dictatorship sent a song critical of the regime to Eurovision? Like, that doesn't track, right?
That's where the softening becomes important.
Yes.
Because in a time of softening, it's not great to smack people on the open street. You know?
Exactly.
So you're kind of like, okay, let them have their bullfight song.
Yeah, the regime actually considered stopping this song from being sent to Eurovision. But exactly for the reason that you talked about, they were like, it's just going to make us look repressive. We're trying to look less
like a bull.
yeah. Estado Novo, slightly less bold. And so song goes to Eurovision. It does middle. It places 10th out of 17. And shortly after that, this period of slight liberal reform in Portugal, it's done.
Yeah.
The hardliners
was too much.
Yeah. This brings us to 1974, right? Once you give people liberal reforms, you can't really take them away without people getting upset.
It's like when you throw a frisbee to a dog, but you pretend to throw it, and then the dog gets confused, and then it gets very angry.
Yes. Or it's like if you wave a red flag at a ball.
Yes.
So opposition to the regime starts growing stronger in 1974. Now, there's one other relevant piece of information before we get to this very cool Eurovision story that we have for you, which is that normally when we talk about right-wing authoritarian regimes on this podcast, we're talking about modern right-wing authoritarian regimes that tend to be anti-internationalist, right? Portugal was different. It was one of the 12 founding members of NATO.
When you still have some desire to fit in an international world and you care about how these other countries see you, there's hope.
You see this with Trata, right? They had an eye towards what the rest of the world thought of them, and therefore were not going to squash the song. There's a qualification on all of this, which is that its internationalism was fundamentally colonialism, right?
Right.
This was a time in the 70s where most other Western European countries that had been colonialist were recognizing national sovereignties of former colonies, and Portugal was hanging on to its colonies for dear life.
The problem becomes that trying to uphold these colonies takes a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that where those resources really land is in the military.
Yeah, and by resources, we're also talking about lives. Of Portuguese soldiers.
If you feel like you are being given orders that now you're seeing your friends die, you're seeing your family members die, and you feel like it's not really for the greatest purpose, people start to turn on you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Opposition within the military grows and eventually gets a little more organized, right? There actually was a kind of like organization within the military known as MFA, or the Movement of Captains. So they planned a coup.
Right. And so the thing with the coup is, obviously, we're in the 70s. How do you bypass the government and communicate to all these people, hey guys, it's a go.
Right. No, 100%.
And you want to find a way that is obvious to everyone involved, but also you can't see it coming for the ones you don't want to see it coming.
Yes. And what is obvious to everyone involved, but is completely incomprehensible to those who aren't? Eurovision. But to make that more concrete, the rebels decided to have their connections at 2 different radio stations play a song that would signal to everyone across the country that the revolution was happening. The rebels had initially chosen a song by this artist, Jose Afonso. Afonso was a political songwriter. He was known as part of a movement called interventionist music, which actually Fernando Tordo's Trata was part of as well. But because Afonso was seen as part of the resistance to the regime, his songs were banned. So the radio stations did not want to play this obviously political song in case the coup didn't work.
Right, because for your safety, you're kind of like, if the coup doesn't work, we kind of want to be able to be like, we had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to signal a revolution without being obvious about it.
So instead of sending a political song, they go with 1974's Eurovision song. It was a song in my broken Portuguese, Depois do Adeus, or basically it translates to after goodbye. This song was by Paulo de Carvalho.
Unfortunately, this song placed last at Eurovision.
In a way, them not being successful might actually have been important, because if they were successful, they would be playing it regularly on the radio.
Oh, 100%. I didn't even think about that. That would have been so sad if the coup just got accidentally set off because a radio DJ got very excited.
Yeah, he was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that song deserved better. And then it's like, guys, no.
So this one radio station is playing After Goodbye. But the other radio station, which was not subject to the exact same censorship, the rebels had them play an explicitly political song, another Jose Afonso song. You clearly don't want to risk being discovered, right? So why still feel the need to play a more obviously revolutionary song? But I think the thing that's kind of interesting about this is that there is a need for that kind of symbolism in a revolution, right? That is what gets people on board and gets people excited.
Totally.
And I'm, totally making up thoughts in their heads, but like this is the only explanation that I can come up with is that like they looked at the situation and they were like, a song called After Goodbye that placed last at Eurovision is not a song that a country can get behind as part of the story,
Right.
So the songs play, they pull off an entirely bloodless coup.
Look at that. A bloodless coup initiated by Eurovision.
By Eurovision. Okay, so now we have a country that moved in the other direction. In early October, Viktor Orban, who we've talked about on this podcast before, he has been ruling Hungary for over a decade consistently, but also was in power in the early 2000s as well. Orban is technically not a dictator. He holds elections that he runs in. They are not fair, they are not free, which is where the term competitive authoritarianism has sort of come from. But Viktor Orban goes to speak to the European Parliament, and members of the European Parliament start singing an anti-fascist anthem from World War II called Bella Ciao. And Roberta Metsola, who is the president of the European Parliament, actually silenced the protest with these words: "This is not the Eurovision."
That's so good.
It's so good. I think it's just like, because the Eurovision is just funny.
Yeah. And also, how many times is Eurovision going to come up in political speeches, in parliaments?
And the thing that I love most about it is the statement is entirely wrong, right? Particularly according to Orban and his party Fidesz, in their imagination, the two bodies are actually very, very similar.
For context, the initial Orban was much more center-right, or at least painted himself that way. And the true colors have gradually come through.
Going back into his history, he was actually educated with a George Soros fellowship, which is highly ironic because Soros has become the big villain in all of his campaigns.
And he actually was the one to negotiate the EU accession for Hungary.
Yes. His party, Fidesz, loses in 2002.
And if there's something we've learned in history, is that people who like to be authoritarian don't like to lose.
Yes, exactly. So he made sure that will never happen again. When he came back into power, he rigged the judicial system. He basically bullied independent press to selling their papers and stuff like that to his cronies.
He packed the courts. He said fake news. He referred to the enemy within. Sorry, I got confused.
But you did and you didn't, is the funny thing with that. But while all this is going on, Hungary is still participating in Eurovision. Calls within the country for Hungary to pull out begin in the popular narrative around Conchita.
So right? That's 2014.
Yes.
Conchita Wurst was a bearded drag queen.
Right.
So not only was it drag, it was kind of a form of drag that even people who like drag, many hadn't seen.
Yes.
It challenged the idea of beauty.
And Orban's Hungary is like a very Catholic regime. It's a very anti-LGBTQ regime. Right. It does make a certain amount of sense, right? But there's another thread in here that I think is worth talking about. In addition to villainizing queer people, the other big villain in Orban's telling of what's wrong with Hungary arose during the migrant crisis. Orban used the migrant crisis to really push an idea of white Hungarians as real Hungarians, right? What's interesting, though, is as Orban is railing against ethnic minorities, Hungary sends to Eurovision as its last contestant, Józsi Papai. And Józsi Papai is Romani. And his most successful Eurovision song, Origo, is actually about overcoming discrimination.
So to give you some of those lyrics translated into English for his song, I was born a vagabond. I have suffered enough. Why did you lie to me that the color of skin doesn't matter? The important point we made before is that remember that you are flying the flag at Eurovision. So not only is it like, here's a singer from Hungary, this is Hungary's representative.
Yeah.
This is what, in this moment, Hungary is saying to Europe is them. Orban, not a fan.
Was definitely not a fan of that. And actually, just to give you some context for how much Orban was railing against Romani people, there was this court case in Hungary where the judge awarded these damages to these Romani families whose kids had to go to segregated schools. Orban actually spoke out against that decision, saying, we take the side of the 80% who are decent working Hungarians who demand a suitable education for their child. He went on to state that the local Roma were lazy, that their children were violent, and that you couldn't educate their kids.
Right.
All of this is to say that, yes, Conchita and Orban's anti-LGBT agenda played into why Hungary actually left Eurovision. But also there was this other element. And suddenly this internationalist body where Hungary was represented by a Romani singer just didn't fit the script anymore. A thing that's interesting to me about this is that these right-wing governments are able to crack down on much drier forms of communication, but art and music take a little bit more to break the back up. Orban is cracking down on the press. Right? He's literally making newspapers be sold to his cronies. He's replacing judges. And yet Hungary is represented by a Romani singer. We think about Portugal in 1973, right? Dictatorial regime. They send Trata, right? Bullfight. And I think about this in terms of Maniza and Little Big, two Eurovision artists who have represented Putin's Russia at a time where Putin's Russia was very repressive. And these are both critics of Putin's Russia. This is another story that is not technically a Eurovision story, but the winner of Hungary's national selection post-Eurovision, so the artist they would have sent to Eurovision recently, is a rapper named Azaria. He has a sex tape out of him sleeping with a fan backstage. He has a big song about smoking weed. And Orban claims to be a huge fan of this rapper. And there's something to me that like really puts a fine point on it. Like here you have this like Catholic regime that is all about morality and the family and everything like that. But they have to deal with the power of music. And again, contemporary music that speaks to the moment is not going to mix well with the Catholic regime.
This was just covered by John Oliver, Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. John Oliver talks about how when you become a naturalized citizen, they play that song and like the government actually licenses it.
Wait, really?
Yeah. But now it's run out. And he talks about all these emails where they're like, you can't use it anymore. But Trump was like lifting this up. And I'm not saying that God Bless the USA is an authoritarian song, but it can speak to this America First thing that Trump talks about.
Yeah.
And Lee Greenwood himself has also introduced Trump at several rallies.
This might actually, I think, be the key, that Trump struggles to find songs because his movement doesn't live in a modern cultural space. These authoritarian movements, particularly the right-wing Christian ones, exist in opposition to the culture. That's why they want to be authoritarians, because they want the government to control a culture that they feel has gotten out of hand. You can't both be against the free culture as it stands of a country and also use that culture to communicate.
No, absolutely that. Absolutely that. As much as society has changed a lot since 1974, 1973, and today, that's something that rings true the whole time.
I think that's entirely right. And I think with that, we should get to our interviews.
Oh, and such interviews we have.
Yes. So first, we are talking to Alicia Michelle. Now, she is the most prominent American YouTuber covering Eurovision.
And I also want to point out, when we were in Malmö, we actually met her in person as well.
Yes.
So despite this interview being virtual, she's just as lovely in person.
As is her mom.
As is her mom, exactly. But then we play a fun little game with Broadway composer extraordinaire, Joe Iconis, whose most famous credits would probably be the Be More Chill musical on Broadway and the fact that he wrote for a little show called Smash.
And one of Joe's newer shows is called the Untitled, Unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical. And of course, Hunter S. Thompson famously covered several elections. Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail is a hugely iconic piece of political journalism. And so we play a little game with him called Bounce or Backlash, Fear and Loathing at Eurovision. But first, let's kick it over to Alicia. So we are here with Alicia Michelle. Alicia is one of the premier American Eurovision content creators out there. She's also the deputy digital director for the SEIU, which, if you don't know, is a union that has about 2 million members. Alicia has a degree in broadcast journalism from Hampton University. And I didn't know this, has performed on stage at the Apollo not once, but twice. So, Alicia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I don't know if I feel worthy of that introduction.
I just want to establish for our listeners that I made none of that up. That is all true.
It is true. It is true.
Can you give us a bit of the story of how you got into Eurovision?
It's weird because I think being from the Washington, D.C. area, it's a really international city. And I grew up going to school with some folks who were European who knew what it was, but none of the pieces of the puzzle really got put together until a friend of mine and her family, who was Greek, were going to Greece for Eurovision in 2006. I don't know if folks can go back to 2006 when Lordi won. It was like actual national news, or international news, I should say.
So then thinking about like moving from Eurovision fan to content creator, what was that inspiration for starting the YouTube channel? And can you talk a little bit about how your background and training in broadcast journalism informed your approach?
I had a boyfriend who was very into YouTube and was like, "Oh my gosh, I watch these videos all the time and they suck." And like
I feel like there was an era where everybody's boyfriend was into YouTube. we're dealing with
still happening. Yeah. I was an on-air radio person and I had worked at stations doing video work. And I never really thought about having a YouTube channel or anything. I really wanted to talk to folks about Eurovision and have like friends I could just digest it with. I mean, now the market is totally flooded. Like everyone has like a reaction channel,
Yeah.
But at the time, there wasn't really someone solo kind of Bethany Moda blog style. Most of the Eurovision sites were doing their interviews, and it was still sort of being used to support the websites as opposed to like this being the primary space for kind of community and engagement.
Can you talk about how your content and your channel has evolved over the years?
Oh, I don't know. I think the biggest discovery was, oh my gosh, like some of the artists actually watch this. like I remember I was like going to Melfest and, I was there really not representing myself. I think I was actually there representing my radio station. And like Benjamin Ingrosso was like, I know you. Like, I know who you are. He was like, you call me Little Benny, like on your YouTube channel. I'm like, oh my gosh, like y'all are watching this? Like, what are you watching this for?
Moving to the contest, how has it sort of evolved since you started your channel?
We have to remark on the quality and the fact that I think Eurovision is now finding itself a little bit more lock in step with the times. I think in the 70s, there were Eurovision songs that were able to chart. And then I think things started getting away in the late 90s and then definitely like the 2000s. I mean, come on, everybody, it's like now it feels a little bit more in the times. I think Lorien in 2012 shifted the contest back to a place where it's like, no, you can find really good current music here. I think the other thing that I've seen change in the contest is clearly the globalization of it. The fact that we as Americans now have the opportunity to vote, this whole rest of the world vote. And I'm going to be honest, I'm sorry, Europeans, you're going to hate hearing this, but the door is going to crack open more. There might be the North American vote. There might be the South American, instead of everyone just being grouped in the rest of the world.
And actually, sort of off of that, people have like a lot of explanations, right, for why Eurovision has started taking off in the States. You'll see people recently like point to the Will Ferrell movie, the rise of TikTok as a medium in a way that people can, find Eurovision songs, growing American openness to foreign language content, the different phases of the language rule. And even some people will say like the wars in Ukraine and Gaza have brought more attention to the contest in a way that has shifted the brand.
Well, for me, I think my answer is actually simpler than that. I think just the internet alone cracked open the door for more people to really fall into Eurovision. Like when I first was figuring out what Eurovision was, I went to the library. I like, nowadays, everyone can just go on the internet. If you see something trending, the video's just put in front of you. So because the internet yielded us into streaming media, AKA that's when Netflix was like, because do I think a Hollywood studio would have given Will Ferrell like a ton of money to go film this like movie? Probably not. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I think that's interesting. When we spoke with the director of the movie, he said that movie was entirely made for a European audience. It wasn't intended for an American audience at all.
Yeah.
And then it became the number one movie in the US. But
Right.
like this sort of globalization of Eurovision seems also to kind of definitely be a goal of Eurovision itself. The EBU have also kind of consciously tried to expand the brand. Having a partnership with TikTok, is held up as one of the bigger recent developments. You mentioned the rest of the world vote. Like, how would you rate the job the organization has done broadly on this front?
Womp womp. I think it's about a 5. There's so much more that could be done. But to be fair, I think they've done what they can with the internal team that they had. I've talked about this ad nauseum, particularly following this year's contest. When you're doing like a show that sort of has this niche community, the skill sets and resumes you would want for your internal team are not going to be that of what you'd want from someone who's maybe applying for a job involving the Olympics. when it seems like the EBU has done some reflection to figure out what they need to do internally to staff this. But I do think there's a considerable amount of work that they could be doing to help. If Royal Caribbean's doing this brand partnership, how can we harness their digital audience? How can we harness their email list, their SMS list? Like, they're not really doing that because honestly, it takes a lot. And they really have a relatively small internal team.
And do you feel like that's fixed by going from one Martin to two Martins?
Womp womp. No. But it's a start. It's a start. Yeah. I'm not one of those people that wants to kind of blow up the EBU. I am like, no, let's give them the constructive feedback that we feel like will actually help them to be successful. Because when you get to meet a lot of these artists where this is their opportunity to be introduced potentially to the world, I want them to have a vehicle like that be good and not feel like a joke. And we know that there have been times where Eurovision has been seen as just that.
You've been critical of Martin Österdal's handling of this year's Eurovision, but rewinding, you were... but, you know, rewinding, you were covering the contest when he took over for Jon Olav. At that point, were there changes you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, there was something to be said for things becoming slightly more streamlined. There did seem to be a little bit more emphasis on giving some of the executive producers of the show a little bit more power. Obviously, once he took over, I do think he has overseen really the globalization of Eurovision. So I think that is a good legacy that he'll have. And, I had another thing too. I'm trying to give you some credit, Martin. Well,
and yet it's
look into the corner.
I think even his role somewhat expanded into, I think, holding some countries who had long been accused of doing funny business. I mean, he's actually the first one to really hold them accountable for it. I think there was also this sense of him kind of becoming a little bit of a sheriff in town, whereas Jon Ola, I think, was kind of like, you all kind of sort it out.
As someone who grew up in Norway, going from a Norwegian director to a Swedish one, Jon Ola's kind of like, oh, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. We're just going to hang out back here. And Martin walks in and he's like, immediately I'm putting my stamp on the competition.
So then actually moving to Eurovision 2024, can you just sort of describe your experience of the contest this year from the ground?
It felt like we couldn't really celebrate. I started my channel to have community. I felt in the spaces that I had, we all got to talk about the songs. Like, you know, we got to focus on really foundationally what Eurovision is how it can unite us with music. And also the fun of who do you think's going to win? But again, it felt muted a little bit. And I've been open about this. Like, I felt discomfort in spaces that I don't think I necessarily should have felt discomfort.
There are a lot of reasons to sort of like lay this at Martin Österdal's feet. I guess one response to that would be that really the core of the problem here is the EBU and EBU decision making, that the inconsistency between the Russia decision and perhaps the Israel decision created an environment where the kinds of things that you're talking about just weren't going to be possible. Is this a problem of communication, or is the problem deeper than that, in that the EBU has kind of lost its way in terms of its values?
I do want to contrast the Russia decision because there is a difference here. You had broadcasters sitting at that table saying, we are not going to participate if they are there. That's not what happened this past year.
Just to sort of zero in on that one a little bit, I think a lot of the messaging around the Russia decision was not one of coalition management. It's the whole story of Eurovision, right? It's founded in the aftermath of World War II. We stand for these values and blah, 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 blah. So there was kind of a precedent created, maybe not by the Russia decision, but by some of the justification at the time given for the Russia decision.
Yeah. That part, I think, is a fair critique that the EBU has swallowed. I've gone on record in saying this. The whole Eurovision 2024, the Israel of it all, the Joost Klein of it all, the Netherlands disqualification should be studied in universities across the world for how you don't handle a crisis communications situation. And this is where I would say PR strategy comes into play. The press wanted to know. The interviewers were there. The press opportunities were there. And I'm not talking about fan media. I'm talking about traditional media. And there wasn't no press conference. I think if they had just had a spokesperson actually out there having conversations with press or Martin, just put Martin out there, I think that would have made a world of difference. I do think that there could be a real conversation for expanding the reference group potentially, or at least placing some level of quotas to make sure that it truly feels representative, because we don't have anybody from a Balkan. And what have we been seeing lately at Eurovision? Balkan countries not participating as much. That's not good.
How do you think about reporting on the politics surrounding each Eurovision? How much do you see that as important context, and how much do you feel it's outside the purview of music journalism?
Politics is about people. We all live in countries. To think that Eurovision is going to exist and politics won't creep up in it is delusional. Like, sweetie, let me hold your hand while I tell you this. It wasn't Loreen who won. Sweden won Eurovision. Right. So I think that's the place to start. But I think where the line becomes blurry, like if the EBU and Martin Osterdahl can make up points for, Romania, who was doing funny business, and Azerbaijan and all of those things, I don't understand why they can't find an artist from that country who then can represent their country, who maybe does not agree with what their government is doing. And I'm saying that in the example of Russia or Belarus.
I love that idea. It's kind of like when you don't recognize like a country's government, like a military coup happens, and then like you're only dealing with the opposition leader who actually like lives in Buenos Aires or something like that.
Right. Right. There are examples of this. Like, I think Bambi Thug is like the perfect example. And I think I have at times gotten emotional about it. And Nemo was another example that I'm like, so you mean to tell me I'm not supposed to vote and support this artist that, one, I just think is like super talented. And also they're an independent artist. They don't even have a label. Like, and this is like their opportunity. And I'm supposed to like walk away from that person who also happens to be part of like a marginalized community because you want to burn this thing down? Because we don't have that many avenues. Even with the democratization of social media, it is still so hard to break through in these spaces. And Eurovision can be such a powerful vehicle. I am an optimist. So I could be a little delusionally optimistic, and I might be holding on longer than others. But I think taking away that platform that could be so great feels like, oh, no, I don't want to do that.
I think one of the sort of interesting stories that you've really been a part of is Eurovision's like evolving relationship to independent content creators.
This is an area that I think the EBU should truly be applauded in, because they were allowing fan media unprecedented access. Because I think some of the mainstream media was like, we don't care. Like, just tell us who wins and we'll write up the thing and, we'll tune in on Saturday night. I think where they're missing out a little bit is if really we are trying to make a little bit more money, and if we are truly trying to make this thing global, they are going to have someone internal that is doing their like influencer creator outreach. Because what they have done sometimes is they just make it open to like influencers. And so you'll get people that aren't really optimal to your brand. Like, you're not doing that personalization thing. And I do some of this work in my day job where it's like, I want to find like the right creator. I want to bring you aboard. We're going to have conversations about like what it is that we do and what we would like to see you bring, and almost get a little bit prescriptive with it. It takes in-house staffing a little bit. I can have empathy for the fact that it's like, oh, dang, like I think you got a little bit sideswiped, but I can have my professional hat on and look at it and go, you should have been prepared for this, though. So now they have the opportunity of a do-over, and they have an opportunity to get more savvy internal. And I really hope they do, And I'm overall optimistic.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to end it on a little bit of optimism for 2025. Alicia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Truly awesome.
Euroverse.
As election season approaches, we're looking back at all the ways that Eurovision songs have been used by politicians to advance a particular idea of what their country should be. In a game we're calling Eurovision Bounce or Backlash, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail.
To help us sort through all of this, we are thrilled to have Broadway composer Joe Iconis. He is the author of numerous shows from Broadway's Be More Chill to Bloodsong of Love to a musical about a famed chronicler of elections, the untitled, unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson musical. Joe's songs were also featured on NBC's Smash, with Broadway Here I Come becoming a runaway hit. Thank you for joining us, Joe.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think this should be a good time.
We'll see.
Yeah, I know. And there we go. It always rides on the edge on this show. Here's how the game's going to work. Mm-hmm. We're going to play you part of a Eurovision song from a particular country, and you're going to guess how it played into that country's politics, whether it was held up as an ideal for the country or whether the song became a controversial flashpoint. In other words, whether this Eurovision song was responsible for a political bounce or backlash.
Before we get to the game, what, if anything, do you know about Eurovision going into this conversation?
I always knew that ABBA won Eurovision without fully understanding what that was. I knew it was some kind of contest. I kind of knew the vibe of like early 70s Eurovision.
Which is great because Eurovision in general vibes early 70s just constantly.
Yeah.
So you're prepared for this.
For a thing that I never really made the effort to research, I feel like a lot of my interests kind of intersect with the Eurovision vibe. Yeah. Like I love like performances from like European variety shows of like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've just never fully jumped into like the Eurovision pool.
I mean, now is the time to jump, Joe.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, this is my first step.
Joe, do you feel solid enough on the rules?
I feel half solid, half confused, which is a great way to be.
Oh, that's great.
Always.
Place to be.
That I have to say is how I always feel watching Eurovision. So
we will give you the name of the song, we'll give you the country, and we'll give you the year so that you can just go into that Rolodex of European political history.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Exactly.
Of which I know very little about. So I think I'm going to do great.
Our first song is from the singer Hadis. She represented Turkey in 2009 with the song Doom Tek Tek.
Okay, so I'm seeing what I would describe as belly dancers. There's 3 of them. This feels very Shakira-like to me. Lots of lights. They're really like doubling down on the belly dancing. It's like you think that you've seen it all, and then it's just more and more and more. Oh, there's a fan, which I love. So it's like a red belly dancing cloth. Oh my gosh, gymnastics. Okay, so people are jumping now. This is very exciting, up-tempo. There's a romance going on between the lead singer and this guy in a dress who just cartwheeled over to her. And this is like a full dance break. The guy's hair is nuts. There's fire now. There's fire where I didn't think there could be. The fire is very close to dancers in flowy cloth, which is really scary in an exciting way. Oh my God, I'm getting distracted by the amount of flips. There's so many flips. Oh my God, now there's hearts everywhere. And there's butterflies everywhere. These are the projections. The projections feel very 2009 to me, but they're going crazy. Now the man in the dress is, oh my gosh, so much pyro. Wow. Oh, that was a great ending.
I have to say, I feel like you gave our listeners the full visual experience of watching that number.
Oh, nice. 100%. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I was trying. There was honestly so much to react to and so much stimuli.
So the question with this song, we know that this played into Turkish politics somehow in 2009. Do we think it was celebrated in the political sphere or denigrated? Was it a bounce or a backlash?
I am going to say, and this is a totally uninformed guess, but because of what to me felt like overt sexuality, unabashed sexuality, I'm going to say that it was a backlash.
Nailed it. There was actually one Turkish official who worked for the public broadcaster who said that the video released along with the song didn't represent Turkey because it purely marketed ass and breasts.
Wow.
Which, so there was like a real right-wing critique of the song, but left-wing critics too didn't love it. There was both like a feminist critique, but also a kind of cultural authenticity critique that by combining sort of Turkish elements with pop in the way that Hadis did, that it turned it into kind of like generic, like Spirit Halloween version of Turkish culture.
Yep, I get it.
I think it's a bop, but I do get it.
Yeah. I mean, the song was fun. Good pyro.
I have always said that Eurovision is the original RuPaul's Drag Race. Because if you think about the over-the-top costumes, the production, the wind machines, it's
the feminist critiques of the acts. Yeah, it's actually. So then actually what happened is 3 years after this song, Turkey actually left Eurovision entirely. This was mostly driven by Prime Minister Erdogan's government, who saw Eurovision as being representative of like super socially liberal sort of Western Europe influence. And actually this year, now President Erdogan reaffirmed his decision to remove Turkey from Eurovision, actually accusing Eurovision of encouraging gender neutralization and threatening the traditional family. He also described participants of the contest as Trojan horses of social corruption.
But because we've had such a good time in Turkey, we're going to stay in Turkey.
Great.
We're moving back to 2003.
Ooh.
This is Sertab Erener's Every Way That I Can.
It's a 5-top of female presenting singers. There is a woman in the center who looks kind of angry. It's definitely a bop of a song. It's got a nice shuffle beat. Oh my gosh. And she's so angry that she's throwing the other women down. So like there's like one woman in the center and then there's 4 women around her and they're all kind of pawing at her and she's like furious at them and she's not gonna wait. Okay, now all of these ribbons came out of her, like in The Lion King when the lionesses pull ribbons out of their eyeballs to symbolize tears. These are pink ribbons. They look like they're like sexy umbilical cords that lead to all of the other women. The main woman in the center is just furious. The anger in her delivery feels at odds with the bounciness of the song, which I really like. Now there's gymnastics. People are flipping all around. Oh, and they're just tugging on the sexy umbilical cord so much. Now they're doing a cute little like shuffle dance. I'm really enjoying this. Everyone has a lot of opinions about what they're doing, which I like. And now it's done. Great. Amazing. Look at that.
The question is politically, did they like the umbilical cord or not?
Because it felt like they were leading with things other than their own sexuality. I'm going to say that it was a bounce.
Nailing it.
Yeah.
Turkey actually won the competition with this.
Oh, good.
Erdogan's opponent in the last election, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, it was his campaign theme song.
Oh my God.
Because...
And this is like 20 years after.
Oh, yeah. If this just was on the charts in Turkey, we might have moved on.
Right.
But Erdogan's opponent also has made a point to say that he wants to bring Turkey back into Eurovision. So, of course, in that sense, the song also becomes important. So, absolutely a bounce. And it's kind of interesting how a song that in so many ways is not political can have such a political importance.
So, Turkey leaves in 2012, right? And then a few years later, you might know this performer, Conchita Wurst. She's like a bearded drag queen.
At the time, she was one of the only mainstream bearded drag queen.
Conchita won for Austria. And Turkey, while no longer being in the contest, like the Turkish government was like, this is confirmation that Eurovision has gone crazy.
Right.
We went to Eurovision, I guess, last year's Eurovision, Every Way That I Can, the Sertab Erener song. Yeah. Conchita performs it. It felt like message to like Erdogan and the Turkish government who would use Conchita as a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world to kind of like remind people that like Turkey like played a major part in the Eurovision story.
She's like, I'm going to take this song that is Turkey's winning moment in Eurovision and I'm going to make sure it's sung by a bearded drag queen.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's both inspirational and a fuck you, which is the best thing.
Oh my God, this sounds like a pride song.
So moving to our next song, we're going all the way back to 1974. A little Swedish supergroup called ABBA.
There they are. Waterloo. They're singing Waterloo, a song we know and love. They look great. The A's are singing. They've got thin corded microphones. They're singing back to back now. Benny's rocking out. Oh, they're singing directly to each other. They're in like ultimate ABBA cosplay, which you would assume from ABBA. That's a very compelling performance. It feels very human. In contrast to the other performances I've been watching, it feels really unrehearsed. You know, it feels really organic and chill and just like a band playing.
That's a really good observation that like the evolution of Eurovision has been to transform into a like arena show.
Yeah.
And, like,
It was always in a concert hall normally for a long time. And now it's always like a sports arena.
There used to be a requirement that any sound on your track, if you had a track, that there was the instrument on stage representing it.
Whoa.
Which led to a really weird moment. Do you remember the song Ooh Ah Just a Little Bit?
Yeah, of course.
So that represented
That was
the
a
UK.
Eurovision song.
I had no idea.
Yeah. But it was a dance song. Gina G literally had like a Mac computer on stage because she had to.
Yeah, no, of course.
Like that's where the sounds
like wires and like switchboards. Yeah.
Did this ABBA song bounce or backlash?
I feel like ABBA is inherently non-controversial. And I would like to believe that Sweden was proud of them. I mean, this might be like a trick one, but I'm going to say bounce.
It is a trick one.
It is a trick
I'm
one.
so sorry, Joe.
And winning means hosting.
Mm-hmm.
And hosting costs a lot of money.
1974, the government had just introduced a new cultural policy. And the feeling was like, we need to be spending more of our resources on Swedish cultural products and things that are not this sort of globalized pop music.
Yeah.
And so then suddenly the entire national broadcaster's budget for the next year has to go to Eurovision.
Little Timmy's cello recital is not being filmed anymore.
The non-controversial aspect of ABBA played poorly with what the Swedish music scene was at the time, actually. Like it was like what you were getting was like this sort of like prog rock music scene that also like was kind of explicitly leftist and political.
Okay.
So much so that actually Sweden did host Eurovision, but also hosted something called the Alternative Festival, Alternative Festivalen.
Yes.
Where basically it was just like, fuck this. And they made it very decentralized. So like all of these different Swedish provinces and towns throw these kind of rock festivals in response to or in protest of Eurovision.
All I know is they should have been nicer to ABBA.
Yeah,
That's like still,
Yeah.
they're the ones.
So now we're going to jump in time to 2019. So this is Mahmood, who's representing Italy.
Great.
With the song Soldi.
Okay. We've got a guy in center in like a velvety shirt. This is the first time we're seeing male dancers. They're feeling very fraught. There's some sort of father-son imagery going on. So it's like these guys are performing and there's like a massive shadow of a father and a massive shadow of a son. He's really passionate about what he's singing, but also is passionate about his moves. The moves are, it feels hip hop influence. Oh, now there's flames. There's flames on the stage and on the back. It feels like projections have improved since the last time we saw projections. The projections are really beautiful. And now it says, money can't buy your love. It just said that to prove the point. Oh, and he did like a really grand finish. He did like a hand thing that it was like a flourish. That's what I would call that. I would say, if I was writing the script of that, I would say, and then he finishes with a hand flourish. Everyone cheered.
Oh my gosh. We love a hand flourish.
Yeah.
So now the question is bounce or backlash?
And did you say this was Italy?
Yeah. Italy, 2019.
Okay. I'm going to say that because it does not strike me as the sort of stereotypical idea of what an Italian pop song would be, I'm going to say that it was a bounce.
This was a backlash. All your reasoning was so right.
You had way too much faith in the Italian people.
Because
it was
I-
actually
yeah.
very moving to watch you come to that conclusion.
Yeah,
because
I really thought about it. You know what? It's
You had
because
so much faith in those Italian politicians, and that was your first mistake.
I know. It's because I am Italian, and so I wanted to believe that they were like, this is different than what we know, and we will embrace it.
And to be fair, commercially, the song did do very well.
Yes,
and
yes,
Mahmood
yes.
is like a major
And
star in Italy.
The thing is that He's half Egyptian. There'd been a bit of a right-wing turn in Italy, anti-immigrant, narrow ideas of what makes an Italian. The part of the song, which jumps into the middle of the song with the part that you started on, he's singing in Arabic for a little bit of the song. This is the thing about Eurovision, is that whatever you end up with now represents a whole nation.
Right. And everything you just said, it's like, yeah, how wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, do you know what people think of when they think of Italy?
Yeah.
You know? Tony Soprano, man. My money's good.
This is positive.
Fucking big fat people with meatballs coming out of their mouths.
Now listen, I don't want to put those two in opposition because I love both.
Same.
So Matteo Salvini, Italy's deputy prime minister and leader of the far-right political party, the Northern League, called into question Mahmoud's Italian identity. Maybe he wanted to see the birth certificate.
Yeah, exactly. He also, I have to say, he called the song meh on Twitter, which I think that really, that would have caught me. As they've said on Smash, don't forget me.
Thank you for looking at me and gesturing when you said, as they said on Smash.
But like so much so, there was even talk in the Italian parliament about changing the rules of the Eurovision selection to make sure this never happened again.
I have a question. Who decides who goes to Eurovision?
Well, this is a very good question because it isn't a simple answer. Because technically it's a competition between national broadcasters.
Okay.
Some countries do an internal selection. It's literally like a little boardroom of people picking. In a lot of the countries, it's a huge competition.
The complicated thing is it is national broadcasters who are choosing, and there's this open question of like how close the national broadcaster is actually to the government itself, right?
Right.
I guess there's something inherently contradictory about a politically appointed, non-political body.
I mean, that's entirely what this podcast is about. So, a country with a famously independent public broadcaster, Belarus.
Yes, of course.
So we are moving to Belarus in 2021.
Okay.
This is the song they sent into Eurovision by a band called Galaxy Zemesta. The translation of the song is called I'll Teach You. And maybe watch the video and then I'll read some of the lyric to sort of provide context.
Oh, great. So automatically this feels different from everything I've seen. This feels more like a band, less like a sort of dance piece. This is I think a 6-person band, maybe 5 people. There's a guy with an acoustic guitar sitting on a stool. They're all playing real instruments. They all seem like really nice folks. They're the sort of folks you might see performing at a coffee house. It's like a living room kind of vibe. Like, oh, you happen to come over and I have a tambourine and I have an electric drum kit and we're just playing. This is like a really sort of chill, kind of like 90s era, medium tempo, like acoustic rock number. There's a couch in the back. There's a bass player with sunglasses strumming along on the couch. This is fun. This sounds like a song that would be in the background of a scene from Friends. It's like that kind of thing. I don't know what they're singing, but they're kind of half smiling. Everything about this feels pleasant. This feels very non-confrontational, very pleasant. Everyone has a half smile. Everyone feels like at least 15 years older than any other person I have seen thus far on the Eurovision stage.
I think that's just living in Belarus.
Yeah, maybe.
Those are high schoolers?
I can't tell whether some of the awkwardness of this English translation of the lyric is the translation software or if it's actually the lyric. You just have to obey me. Change outlived norms. I'll teach you how to walk along the line. You'll be content, happy with everything. Is there a meaning maybe emerging, or if not, do you just have a sense of whether this would be a bounce or a backlash in Belarus?
I'm going to say, okay, the lyrics felt like there was more going on than I was anticipating from the music. I'm going to say backlash.
Okay, so I am classifying this as a bounce, but I think as far as the ultimate point system, which is very important to this game, I think we can count anything as the right answer on this. This was 2021.
Okay.
The Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, had just claimed victory in an election that he did not win.
Yep.
There were these really intense student protests. More than 30,000 people were arrested, hundreds beaten. This song submitted by Lukashenko's government was a taunting song to the protesters.
Yep.
Eurovision rejected this song for being too fascist.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But, in terms of how the song was held up by the Belarusian government.
Yeah.
They're very pro this song. They really like this song.
So finally, we have Bilal Hassani, who represented France at Eurovision in 2019 with the song Roi.
It was such good French.
Yeah, it was nice.
And I know I will always be.
This person that's singing in English, I literally can't tell if this is a person or if it's like an AI.
Yeah,
literally can't tell. The projections are out of control now. Oh, it was a person. This is a person. Okay, this is a person who actually is dressed in a manner that feels not unlike ABBA. Okay, another person just came out. Okay, these people have shapes to them that feel different than any other performance I have seen thus far on Eurovision. The female identifying person who just came out is a woman who's dancing sort of ballet, like aggressive ballet. This feels far more art forward than anything I've seen. This feels very theatrical. I can't quite hear the lyrics, but it feels like whatever the lyrics are impassioned in some way. It's over. But that was a very striking performance.
Now the question is, bounce or backlash?
I'm going to say backlash.
Nailed it.
It feels pretty right on.
Yeah. You were like, this is what Trump supporters would call a way too woke number.
It was very much giving woke, for sure.
And there's also like a secondary element of this idea of Frenchness, to the point where there's this other French act. It was like the first French act in the over 60-year history of Eurovision to sing in English. And the Minister of French Culture had a meltdown.
Whoa.
He was like,
He's like, when you have the opportunity to represent France on the world stage, you sing in French.
That's chilling.
it is a little chilling.
It really
it's
is,
like the rough translation of what he said.
But this song,
Yes. I mean, it also sort of coincided with the rise of the radical right in France in EU elections. Henry Leroy, the senator of the Alpes-Maritimes, requested that Hassani be dismissed urgently from the contest. In 2023, Hassani was forced to cancel a concert in a former basilica in Metz after receiving threats from a group of far-right Catholics.
and there was another element hanging over all of this, which was that year the contest was hosted in Israel. So there were right-wing activists who went back through Bilal's Facebook posts from being a teenager to claim that because they were Muslim, they were anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. So there was definitely quite a backlash, but it's a very cool performance, I think.
After being introduced to Eurovision, what's your takeaway?
I truly think about it differently. This has been a very illuminating hour. I did not realize how directly it interacts with politics. It's really wild. Just the fact that it's literally a talking point. And this idea of artists sort of being thrust into politics in a way that goes beyond artists having a political message in their songs or artists making statements about songs. Dude, really is a sort of wild thing. And there's just nothing like it here.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy because I think that so much of our media, especially now, lives in pockets. We've joked about before that sometimes you'll go see a show in New York and it's the conclusion is gay people matter. And you're like, who in this audience doesn't? You know what I mean? And it's just it's a beautiful show, but you're just kind of going as a political piece. I was I'm not sure if we're changing hearts and minds, but if you then had to take that show and perform it, the Kentucky Derby or something.
Joe, thank you so much for being here, for doing this. This was awesome.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And I'm excited to watch more clips of Eurovision.
Euroverse.
Thank you so much to our guests, Alicia Michelle and Joe Iconis.
Yes.
Thank you so much to the Signal Awards and to the Davey Awards for recognizing this podcast in its very first season.
And thank you to you, Magnus.
And thank you to you. Now, we are still in bonus episode territory, but you will have one more bonus episode from us around the holiday times before we kick off with season 2 in the new year. And until then,
happy Eurovision.